Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 20 of the 2023 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft. And the NFL Combine is in full swing in Indianapolis. That's right. Defensive linemen, linebackers took the field earlier today. Taping this Thursday night. The defensive backs will be taking the field tomorrow. Episode 18 was dedicated to the defensive linemen, linebackers in episode 19. Episode 20, we're going to be talking about the corners and the safeties, who you'll be seeing there on Friday. Want to break down the guys, what I'm going to be expecting to see from each of those players. We've got a lot of guys to talk through. 36 corners, 23 safeties to be exact. So there's a lot to cover. We'll jump right into it, but really just kind of a teaser on what we're going to be talking about after the Combine has taken place, because we're going to preview each of the positions, and then we'll do a recap session, talk about who really won the day, who really improved their draft stock, and who may have a little bit of work to do there on their pro days. But some of these standouts, I think when you look at the defensive line, obviously the first group were the defensive tackles that took the field. Brian Bresee running that 4.93 40, I thought unofficially was nice for him. Ultimately, when he came out there and ran, I think the official time wound up being a 4.86. That's really what we were looking for. The athletic profile looked pretty smooth in the drills as well. But Kalijah Cansey running that 4.67 40, I think that's the fastest for a defensive tackle since, I want to say 2006. So this is a guy who is moving up draft boards. He may have even eclipsed Brian Bresee as the number 2 defensive tackle behind Jalen Carter. I thought, Gervon Dexter showed off a lot more athleticism. And then when you get into the drills, Zach Pickens, we talked about wanting to see more of that 2021 form. I thought he looked a little bit slower in his 2022 film. Now that I've seen him there at the Combine running a sub 540, I want to go back and study the film a little bit more, especially getting into some additional tape there in 2022, because he looked really good even in the drills. I thought that Jalen Redmond, the second fastest 40 at 4.81, very athletic, a guy that has double-digit tackles for loss, can rush the passer as well. He helped himself out quite a bit. And then Moro Ojomo ran a 5.04 40, so not the best for a guy his size, but looked very smooth, looked explosive in the drills, moved very well laterally, and that's something that you definitely want to see. So I think he definitely improved his stock. He's the guy that I could see absolutely us talking about him in that day 2 conversation. Then you get to the edge rushers, and Nolan Smith put on a show. 238 pounds, 41-inch vertical leap, runs a 4.39 40. I mean, that's absolutely staggering. And then you have Ade Adebare. We knew that he had that power. I talked about what type of athlete are we going to see from him. At 280 pounds, ran a 4.49 40. If there was any question about him being a day 2 pick, I think that pretty much went out the window after that time. Will Anderson, wanted to see him really elevate that game. Still came away with a 4.6 40. We're going to talk about some of the drills and kind of get into him a little bit more. I talked about Nick Herbig. What's he going to show up at? He showed up at 240 pounds. Ended up running a 4.65 40. I think that additional bulk really helped him because we talked about him being kind of an undersized edge rusher. So that I think he's another guy that definitely showed up and showed up in a big way. You get to the linebackers, and obviously Owen Papo, we knew he was going to be an athlete. Same with Trenton Simpson, running a 4.39, 4.43 respectively. And then Yasir Abdullah, a guy who I think is a tremendous pass rusher. He runs a 4.47. He's moving up draft boards for sure into that day 2 conversation. Same with Dorian Williams. Look, I mentioned D. Winters as a potential will linebacker, runs that 4.49 along with Dorian Williams. So those are some absolutely phenomenal times for those guys. I think that definitely is going to help their draft stock overall. Jack Campbell runs a 4.65 40. There were concerns about his overall athleticism. We'll talk about the drills, but at least the 40 time was pretty respectable. Got that under that 4.7 mark. So I think his status as a second-round linebacker is definitely solidified there. So just a little bit of a teaser to what we'll be talking about there, day 1 of the NFL Combine. After we get through all of the previews, we'll talk about that once all 4 of those days have been wrapped up. So let's jump right into the corners. and we'll talk through each of these players, really kind of what we're looking for. Alex Austin out of Oregon State. Look, this is a tall, lanky corner and a guy who has tremendous ball skills. I think this is a guy that's really looking to put his name on the map. I thought he looked really good against USC going up against Jordan Addison. Really a playmaker, very athletic there on the outside. 6'1", 192 pounds. This is a guy that I think, can play that man-to-man, and you really are just looking for some of that fluidity, especially for a guy who's 6'1". I think you really want to kind of separate yourself for a guy that's going to be that size. And look, he in his 4 seasons there with the Beavers ended up with 4 interceptions, 20 pass breakups. So I think this is a way for him to kind of showcase as this, a sophomore, really start making a name for himself and kind of moving it into the same conversation with a lot of these other guys on the board. Deonte Banks out of Maryland. Now look, this is one of 2 Maryland DBs that are going to come off and compete back to back. Now Deonte Banks is another guy. Look, 6'1", 200 pounds. He's a physical dude, and really wants to jam guys, get his hands on you. Is a playmaker there on the outside. Don't just look at the stats. This is a guy that can lock you down. He's got he's a press corner. You want to see the physicality come out, and we know that he's that physical presence. But what are we going to see from him from an athletic standpoint? What's that athletic profile look like? Because he's one of those guys who could potentially be a first-round pick, possibly fall to round number 2. Then you've got Jacorian Bennett, his teammate and really his running mate on the other side. He's 5'11", 200 pounds. Obviously, what's he going to measure in at? This is a guy who, is he a guy that you can line up on the outside? He's probably going to be playing on the inside more than likely. 5 interceptions, 24 pass breakups. Isn't afraid to get his nose dirty in the running game as well. So you just want to continue to see that explosiveness, see just how quick he is. Can he drive on the football and make plays? You want to, obviously, the fluidity with the hips should be there for a guy like Jacorian Bennett. Look, 5'11", 200, so he's pretty solidly built as well. Obviously you want to see what the measurements come in there at the combine, but looking forward to that. Mekhi Blackman out of USC. Now, with Mekhi Blackman, this is a guy that was kind of up and down, very handsy in the tape. So you'll see him, he'll grab a guy, doesn't always trust his technique. 6 foot, 170 pounds, kind of a lankier corner. But look, the ball skills are absolutely evident. You put on that Stanford tape, you watch him attack the football in the air, tip the ball to himself for an interception in the end zone. A guy that when they needed a big play out of their secondary, you could absolutely count on number 6 for the Trojans. And Mekhi Blackman, for me, is one of those corners that I think he needs to have a really solid day, because he's someone that could be in that day 2 conversation into that 3rd round, but he could also come off the board as low as round number 5. So I think a big day out of him, showcasing that athleticism to go along with his ability to play in that man coverage and attack the football in the air. I think that's really going to go a long way. Also needs to make sure that he's answering to some of that grabbiness, because look, you got to be able to trust your technique. You're not going to get away with that at the next level. So trust in that technique. You're in position to make a play on the football. Just go up and get it. Then you get to Lance Boykin out of Coastal Carolina. Lance Boykin's an interesting kid. He's got tremendous length, and that's one of the things that I think is going to bode well for him. He's 6'3", 210 pounds, transferred from Old Dominion to Coastal Carolina. A guy with 7 interceptions, including 5 in the last 2 seasons while he was there with the Chanticleers, and also had 12 PBUs there with the Chanticleers. And with Lance Boykin, this is a guy who has decent hips, can flip them pretty quickly, can drive on the ball, seem to be a step slow a little bit. So that's one of the things that I want to look at is some of that stiffness. He seemed to take some poor angles watching some of the film as well at times. So being able to watch his fluidity, his movement out there, and then his ability as he's driving on the football, what type of angles is he making in some of the drills? Is he a standout or a guy that's just going to kind of blend into the situation. Julius Brents is an interesting dude because he is a monster at that cornerback position. He's 6'4", 204, has length for days, 4 interceptions this past season, but he's also a guy that also seemed to get burned quite a bit, getting vertical. This is a guy, look, I think he can drop. The zone coverage is absolutely there. You see some of that length as well. Look, when you talk about guys who are 6'4", I think the prototypical tall corner is going to be Tariq Woolen. And when you look at Tariq Woolen, obviously that converted wide receiver, but with Woolen, when he was coming out, he was raw. Came out as a 5th round pick there for the Seahawks, and at 6'4", 205 pounds, and had only had 2 interceptions, 9 pass breakups in his career there at UTSA. Dude didn't even start for the majority of the season for the Roadrunners, and then we know what he did out on the football field. So NFL's a copycat league. They can look at this kid and say, you know what, if Julius Brents can run a 4.26 40, then we're really talking about things there. I don't see him doing that. He's probably falling more into the lines of guys like Lonnie Johnson coming out. I think Lonnie Johnson Jr. With the Tennessee Titans, when he came out and entered the draft, there was a lot of hype around him being, a taller corner. Ended up only coming in at 6'1" and 7/8, ran a 4.52 40. So it's going to be interesting to see just that athleticism and that athletic profile there with Julius Brents. Is he a guy that we can really line up on the outside? What type of athlete are we really talking about here? Miles Brooks out of Louisiana Tech is a guy that I think is kind of flying under the radar. People aren't really talking about, but was a really solid corner there for the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs. 3 interceptions, 8 pass breakups in 2022, and a guy that he ran stride for stride with Missouri's Luther Burden when La Tech took on the Mizzou Tigers. Ran stride for stride down the sideline, eyes in the backfield, used that arm bar to feel the wide receiver, then able to elevate, get a hand in, and knock it away. Some dumb penalties called against him, so I think that's something that they're going to have to talk about a little bit. But 6'2", 198 pounds. The junior definitely has some skills, and again, one of those taller corners. We want to see really what that athletic profile is looking like. Is he a guy that can kind of separate from some of these guys at some of these bigger colleges? We're probably talking about a guy that's going to come off the board sometime on day 3, but I think a guy that could end up working his way into the rotation. Cameron Brown out of Ohio State, 6 foot, 190 pounds. This guy was just a solid performer for them. His issue really was all about health. Played in 9 games in 2021, 8 games in 2022. This is a guy that he was solid when he was out there, but they couldn't keep him on the field. So I think the medicals are really going to be big for him, and then also show off that athleticism as well. I think that's something that we really have to see out of Cam Brown is look, you are injury prone, it seems like. So let's make sure that when you are healthy coming back, because you were dealing with a knee injury early on in 2022. What does that look like? And how quickly are you bouncing back? He even ended up with a stinger later on in the season as well against Michigan. So this was a guy, it just seemed like injuries kept seeming to find this kid. But if you can keep him on the field, the kid can be a player. I just worry about that injury history potentially causing him to be a day 3 pick. Arquan Bush. Now look, Arquan, obviously you look at Cincinnati last year, and you had obviously the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year in Sauce Gardner. You had Kobe Bryant, the Jim Thorpe Award winner, but Arquan Bush was a solid player for them as well. Really that nickel, moved into that corner spot when those two guys left for the NFL. 6 foot, 185 pounds, offers that versatility, and look, the ball skills are evident. 4 seasons with the Bearcats with at least 2 interceptions, 9 for his career, 21 pass breakups. I think because of his versatility, he's a guy that could absolutely get drafted. Want to see, again, what can he do out there? Can he separate himself from some of these other guys that are out there? because there are a lot of athletic corners, a lot of guys that we're going to be watching. I think Arquan Bush gets drafted, but I think it won't be until day 3. Keitrell Clark, kind of an undersized corner. He's 5'11", 165 pounds, and really this is going to be a guy that we're going to be keeping an eye on. Has good ball skills. He's just undersized, and so obviously when you've got those undersized corners, you're talking about, okay, this is a guy that's likely going to play inside, play that nickel. You want to see the quickness, you want to see the fluidity with the hips, you want to see his ability to drive on the football. So those are some of the things you're going to be looking for there. Emmanuel Forbes, out of Mississippi State, 6 foot, 180 pounds. This guy can be a lockdown corner on the outside. I think that's absolutely apparent. A guy that has 6 defensive touchdowns, picking passes off and returning them for a score, has a knack for that, that pick 6, right? 14 interceptions in his career, including 6 this past season. 20 pass breakups. To me, I look at Emmanuel Forbes and I see a first-round corner. I just want him to go out there and showcase that ability, prove to everyone that he is a first-round corner, that he should be selected above guys like Deonte Banks. Because I think really when you talk to everyone, you've got Devin Witherspoon, you've got Christian Gonzalez, and you've got Joey Porter. Those are my 3 guys. After that, I think there's really some room there for who's going to be that number 4 corner. Is it Keely Ringo? Is it Emmanuel Forbes? Who's that guy going to be that's going to step up there? And I think Emmanuel Forbes has a great shot at coming out here and absolutely balling out. And if he does that, that'll, I think, solidify his status as the number 4 corner in this draft. Mekhi Garner, out of LSU, formerly of Louisiana. And look, 6'2", 212. He's a big physical guy out there on the outside. And 23 pass breakups. Had 3 interceptions in 2020. Hasn't seen a pick since, but he's a physical presence there on the outside. I wonder if ultimately his home is going to be at the safety position. You want to look for some of that stiffness, see if he's a guy that's going to be able to play on the outside. I ultimately think safety is going to be his role. I think he's going to be a late day 3 selection. And really, he's going to have to show that athleticism to be able to move his way back into that cornerback consideration. The cover skills are there. I just worry about his ability to turn and run. You worry about that ability to drive on the football. I think some of his straight line is fine, but that lateral agility may get himself into trouble, especially in coverage on the outside. Which takes us to Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. Look, transfer from Colorado, gets to Oregon, that bigger profile, right? And this guy is the best pure cover corner in this year's draft, in my opinion. A guy that just sticks like glue to his man, uses the sideline to his advantage, tremendous ball skills, press corner, wants to get his hands on you, then he'll turn, run, locates the football, gets his head around, knows where his man is, isn't going to panic, has excellent recovery speed, closes that distance in a hurry, and then he knows what to do when he goes up and gets to the football, the hand fighting, everything else. This guy he knows what he's doing out there on the edge, and I think really when you're talking about the pure cover corner ability, I think he's that top corner. The question's going to be the physicality of Devin Witherspoon, the length of Joey Porter Jr., or the overall man cover skills of Christian Gonzalez. Who's going to be that first cornerback taken? I think the Lions at 6, they need help at that cornerback position. I think one of those 3 guys is going to come off the board at number 6, and I think the combine is really going to help solidify that order in that cornerback class, and I think Christian Gonzalez has a chance to really make a statement. Which takes us to Travius Hodges-Tomlinson, this year's Jim Thorpe Award winner coming out of TCU, and I think there's no question. Everybody knows that this guy is a baller. He's a physical presence. He plays bigger than his size. The question is that size, 5'7". They had him measured at 5'9" there with the Horned Frogs, but he actually measured in at 5'7", and so a corner that small, you're thinking more like Nickel Roby-Coleman, a guy that could still make plays. But look, Hodges Tomlinson, he was out there on the outside, and even though there were the height mismatches, he was still a very he was a gamer. He was still going to challenge you, and he was still going to attack the football. He was aggressive. He'd drive on the football really well. I think his home is going to be inside that slot corner, but that 5'7", it's going to scare you a little bit. I think some teams may even pull him off their draft board. But look, Nickel Roby-Coleman was a solid pro coming out of USC, best years there with the Buffalo Bills, and he was an undrafted free agent that ultimately worked his way onto the team. I think Hodges Tomlinson, the bloodlines, the nephew of LaDainian Tomlinson, I think there's a good chance that we do see him drafted, but he's going to have to really wow everyone here at the Combine to solidify that status, because when you're talking about a corner that's that small, you got to make sure that this is a guy that fits the athletic profile that you're looking for. Is he going to be a guy that can make plays on the ball? Anthony Johnson out of Virginia. Now, Anthony Johnson is a guy that I need to honestly go back and do some more studying on. I didn't get a good chance to see a ton of Virginia football, and when I did, I wasn't studying Anthony Johnson nearly like I should. But look, 6'1", 205. I know that he's got ball skills for days, 30 pass breakups, 7 interceptions in his career, transferred to Virginia from Louisville prior to the 2021 season, and was absolutely balling out for the Cavaliers there in 2022 with double-digit pass breakups, and a guy that has a nose for the football. I do know that, but I need to get some additional tape on him and watch a little bit more. A guy who also has 9 tackles for loss in his career, so he's willing to come up and hit you, tackle you, get you down behind the line of scrimmage. So whether it's against the run or being effective, especially on those quick throws into the boundary, being able to beat blocks and drop guys for loss. So I think that bodes well for his draft stock. Just want to see if he can separate himself a little bit, be one of those guys that teams are buzzing about after his performance. Some of these guys that may not have that name recognition of some of these other corners, I think these are the guys that can use a platform like the Combine to really start breaking out and make guys like myself go back and take a look at more game film. Jalen Jones out of Texas A&M, 6'2", 205. So there's absolute length. There's no question about that. His ability on the outside, I thought he was up and down. If you look at the stats and you just want to pay attention to stats, then you're going to look at it and say, look, just 2 pass breakups, no interceptions. They didn't throw a ton at him. When they did, he was able to drive on the football, get a hand in, and make a play. A guy that's going to be able to get downhill and drop guys right around the line of scrimmage. I think being a guy that's 6'2" and over 200 pounds, you want to make sure that he can be a fluid athlete there on the outside, and the production shouldn't scare you too much. I remember Mackenzie Alexander was a guy that never had an interception in his career there at Clemson, which ultimately caused him to fall to round number 2. But a guy that still has been a solid performer. So Jalen Jones, a solid performance at the Combine, I think will solidify his status as a day 2 corner. I just don't think that there's enough there to say that he's absolutely a first-round guy. Some people have actually had him coming off the board in round number 1. I just don't think that it's necessarily there just yet. Nick Jones out of Ball State, a guy that, look, people haven't been talking about, but he's 6 foot, 185 pounds, and he's a playmaker. He was a playmaker there for the Cardinals. 2 interceptions, 12 pass breakups in 2022. I love his ability to be able to drive on the football. The ball skills are evident. You just want to see, just how fluid he is as an athlete. The game film shows a guy that can close on that football in a hurry. You see the ball skills. I think he's a mid-day 3 guy. And so anything he can do at the combine to really show off some of that athleticism could bode well for that draft stock and potentially move him up the draft board. Caillou Blue Kelly, another guy that has tremendous bloodlines. His father, Brian Kelly, Tampa Bay Buccaneer, former USC Trojan as well. And look, 6'1", 186 pounds, 23 pass breakups in his career. The ball skills definitely jump off the film. What I love about Caillou Blue Kelly is his positioning. You always see the body position. That was evident against Notre Dame. Covered Michael Mayer, running up the field, inside release, comes back on a curl, and Kelly was really sitting on that route, able to get inside Mayer, the body position, ball thrown to the inside, was able to get his hand in and knock the football away. Also, if a quarterback's going to make a mistake and throw that ball a little bit to the inside, because of his body position down the field and those ball skills, he's absolutely going to be a guy that's going to be able to make a play on the football. I think he's a guy that can beat the block and shoot into the backfield and make plays in the open field. I think he's a patient corner. Waits for the receiver to commit either to the outside or inside. Does get himself in trouble with the eyes in the backfield. And can get susceptible to those double moves. Got beaten off the line by Jordan Addison on a 75-yard touchdown. That was really where Jordan Addison was at his best, by the way. Wide receivers we're not going to talk about yet, but Addison was battling an ankle injury for most of the season. I believe that Stanford game was his last game at USC, where he was truly his explosive self. And that performance was absolutely dominant, and Caillou Blue Kelly got an introduction into some of that speed. So really want to see some of that athleticism coming out from him. Look, when they played USC last year, went up against Drake London, go route, able to go up and knock the pass away. This was a big leaper, was able to utilize his length, his size, to really challenge Drake London. I thought that was a pretty well-contested performance there against Drake. Ultimately, I think Drake used some of that size, especially boxing out Kelly, beating him on that one-on-one. So, the physicality, though, this is a guy that's going to challenge you, and so I like that, but I want to see some of that athleticism come out as well in some of these drills. Darrell Luter Jr. out of South Alabama. This is a guy, look, one of the better performers in all of the Sun Belt Conference, and a guy that I think has a chance to really showcase some of his skills here at the Combine. 6'1", 180 pounds, 5 interceptions, including 4 in 2021, 18 pass breakups, and I think this is a guy that I think he's quicker than he is fast, but does a really good job driving on footballs, on those out routes, gets underneath those routes, gets a hand in to break them up. Good ability to wrap the receivers up, drive through the ball carrier, not allow any yak as well. So again, what type of athletic profile are we talking about with Darrell Luter? Day 3 guy. I think this performance could help him potentially move his way up a little bit there on day number 3. Then there's Cameron Mitchell out of Northwestern. And with Cameron Mitchell, this guy, he came out, he's 6'1", 195 pounds, redshirt junior, and decided to come out after the season. 18 pass breakups in his career, a couple of picks. I was kind of surprised that he did come out. I like the cover skills. I see the ability to run stride for stride down the sideline. You see some of the position there. Never lets that receiver get over the top of his route on a lot of those plays. Stayed right in the hip pocket of Trey Palmer. Able to elevate and attack that football as well. Does a really good job attacking that catch point. Even going up against some of the big tight ends, like against Ohio State, going up against Big G Scott, did a really good job being able to cover him. So you like that ability, you like his ability to drive on the football. I just thought, looking especially at this draft class and the depth of the class, that Cam Mitchell, it would have served him best to come back to Northwestern for another season. But entering the draft, he's a day 3 guy for me. And can he separate himself? He's just in this group of guys in day 3 that are really going to be fighting for that positioning into that 5th, 6th, 7th round. Riley Moss of Iowa, look, 6'1", 194 pounds, and I don't know why people doubt this guy's ability. They talk about should he be a safety? Look, his Senior Bowl performance showed that he's got the cover skills for days, that he can be a guy on the outside. He's got the physicality as well. He's always in position to make a play on the football. 3 pick sixes in his career, a total of 11 interceptions, 26 pass breakups. This guy is a ball player and will be, I think at some point in his career, probably early on as well, he'll be a starting corner in the league. And I think this will be a way for him to showcase his ability and show why he deserves to be a day 2 pick. Clark Phillips III out of Utah. Look, another guy who has tremendous ball skills. I think everybody have fun, watching any of the matchups that Clark Phillips was involved in. 5'10", 191 pounds. Another guy who has a knack for finding the end zone. 4 pick sixes in his career. Had 6 interceptions this past season. He had 13 pass breakups in 2021. So a guy that just absolutely knows how to make plays on the football. Just that nose for the ball. Reads the quarterback really well. Does a great job. All the great corners do a great job of being in position, locating the football, and then being able to attack. And they don't really panic either. That's the other thing. A lot of these guys, I mentioned that with Mekhi Blackman, panicking and not trusting their technique and getting themselves into trouble because of that. Phillips reminds me a lot of a couple of Pac-12 corners that recently came off the board. You think last year Trent McDuffie ultimately was taken with the 21st overall selection, and at the combine ran a 4.4 440 at 5'10 3/4, 193 pounds. And then his running mate there, Kyler Gordon, another guy who was an exceptional performer in the Pac-12, 5'11 and a half, runs that 4.5 240, and ultimately was a second-round pick, number 39 overall. Now with Clark Phillips, obviously, the question is going to be that size. How big is he really? I think some of that measurement is going to really play well for him potentially if he's at 5'10 range, especially if he's running that 40 time around where we saw Trent McDuffie. Because of those ball skills, I can see this guy getting himself drafted. I mentioned Emmanuel Forbes there. Don't forget about Cam Smith, and don't forget about Clark Phillips. I think those are the guys that really we need to be talking about there. After that, yes, you've got Deonte Banks and DJ Turner, Kelly Ringo, but these are the guys that have been out there performing and are looking poised to really be those first-round picks. Then you've got Joey Porter Jr. When you talk about bloodlines, you've got to talk about Joey Porter Jr. as well. 6'2", 192 pounds. His dad, Joey, I think everybody knows him for his time there with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but tremendous length. I think that's really the biggest thing. Just has that ability to jam you off the football. Very physical with his hands. You just love the hips as well, to be able to turn and run with the receiver while those eyes are in the backfield. I think that's something that you definitely see time and time again. Look, they played Purdue. Charlie Jones jumped to the outside. Porter ends up going with him and was one of the few guys where Charlie Jones was not able to separate from. Charlie Jones is a bad dude there on the outside. The biggest thing that you did see in 2021 out of Joey Porter going up against a guy like Chris Olave, he was very handsy, grabbing the jersey when he tried to cut away from him, call for defensive pass interference. So obviously there are some concerns there, with some of that grabbiness. But the physicality is absolutely there. You just want to see just how athletic he's going to be at 6'2" and 192 pounds. That wingspan is absolutely ridiculous. Curious to see exactly what it's measured in at. but a guy that can absolutely make plays there on the outside. And I think that athleticism is really going to go a long way for Porter, in determining exactly where he is going to come off the football or off the board. Eli Ricks, Alabama, formerly of LSU, and I think really with Eli Ricks, the question is going to be, how fast is he really? He's one of those guys to where he's very aggressive. You see the ball skills, but will also get himself into trouble. He's going to grab jerseys. He's a guy that and I look at my notes. I've got that Mississippi State, LSU, Auburn, where he would sit there and panic at times, get beaten, and then grab the jersey. Obviously, he sat out the 2021 season for part of the year with a shoulder injury. Ultimately comes to Alabama, and I think really with Eli Ricks, the question for me with him is he's 6'2", 196 pounds. Where ultimately is he going to be playing? Because the question is just how fast is this guy? Where's what's that speed profile really look like for him? In 2020, he came out as a true freshman, 4 interceptions, 5 pass breakups. Really turned a lot of heads, and everyone was like, "Wow, this guy could be the next great LSU corner." Right? When I look at him, you wonder, all right, is he a Greedy Williams? Who's 6'2", 185 pounds, was a second-round pick, number 46 overall of the Cleveland Browns. Ran a 4.37 40 though, and that was kind of the difference there. I'm curious, what's Eli Ricks going to run? If it's in that 4.6 range, then obviously that's going to be a huge impact to that draft stock. And I just don't know that he's necessarily returned to that 2020 form. So want to see the type of athlete that he is at this point. Which then brings us to probably the most polarizing of the corners, which is Kelly Ringo. I think everybody's all over the board with him. 6'2", 205, 4 interceptions, 15 pass breakups. A guy that solidified the win there for Georgia in 2021. The national championship there, and a guy that has the ball skills. You see him put himself in position to make plays, gets over the top of routes. Can drive on the football, but also gets beaten a ton. And I know that it's because he's lining up against the number 1 receiver quite a bit. But he struggled against Marvin Harrison. He struggled against at times even against Keyshawn Boutte. It really didn't matter who he lined up against. Those guys were able to get after him. And I thought that was something that he struggled at times with. He'd get physical, and that was something that I thought was nice. You'd see the physicality, especially against Cedric Tillman. The physicality was absolutely there. Would misjudge the football quite a bit too. But just him getting beaten, and getting that head around. Sometimes he's losing where that receiver was. Sometimes they'll get separation. You really want to see just how fluid of an athlete Keely Ringo truly is, because if he's just an average athlete, then I think you really have to take the first round consideration off the board. I don't have him in round number 1 right now. I just don't, because I don't see first round. The playmaking ability is there, but I think ultimately, he's better suited as a second round pick. And I think, depending on what happens at the combine, we may solidify that. That'll be one of the question marks that I have. Darius Rush, I thought definitely helped himself at the Senior Bowl. A guy that seemed to be all over the field making plays in practice. 6'2", 195 pounds, a guy that was able to jump routes, get his hand in the passing lane, 15 pass breakups, 3 interceptions in his career. Utilizing this postseason and the pre-draft process, you've got, he excelled at the All-Star game. What's he going to do at the combine? What are we going to see at his pro day? If he continues to put together some really good tape for coaches after the season, then he's a guy that I think could absolutely continue to move up draft boards. Which then takes us to Cam Smith. Cam Smith out of South Carolina. Could he be the next South Carolina Gamecock to be a first-round pick? 6'1", 187 pounds. Ball skills for days. 6 interceptions, 18 pass breakups. You love the size. Again, you're going to get to see him against some of these other guys and see that athleticism. You want to see, does he stack up with a lot of these guys? He can play corner on the outside. He can be a nickel. Got beaten deep at times, but then was able to show that speed, that closing speed, to be able to make a break on it. And watched him against Jalen Hyatt one-on-one. This is a guy, the Biletnikoff Award winner. You saw him with the back pedal opened up to the inside, receiver releases to the outside, able to get the hips around, down the field, and stays right with him, force the incompletion. You see him then in off coverage versus Hyatt into the end zone, reads the swing pass to the running back, comes off his man, downhill, lights up the running back for a tackle for loss, undercutting the running back behind the line of scrimmage in the open field, ultimately forced a field goal by Tennessee there as well. So it's one of those things to where, even coming downhill on Hyatt, who catches a pass in front of him, that wrap-up ability didn't allow any yak, kept him in front of him the entire time, driving downhill, able to get his hands in the passing lane and break everything up. Jalen Hyatt had 6 receptions for 65 yards in the first half, did nothing in the second half. And I mean, when you're talking about the Biletnikoff Award winner and a guy that was making plays and really torched teams time and time again, I think Cam Smith's ability to lock him down in the second half was a big reason why South Carolina wound up beating Tennessee on November 19th. And so when you talk about that, you just look for some of those individual matchups. I think that game solidified Cam Smith's, the argument that Cam Smith should be a first-round pick. And then I think, just being able to showcase and show, he's the athlete that everybody expected him to be here at the Combine. Terrell Smith out of Minnesota, a guy that people aren't really talking about a ton, but he's 6'1", 215 pounds. He's big. He's physical. A guy that, look, he had 4.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks this season. So a guy that can get physical against both the run and shows some ability to break off the edge and make plays behind the line of scrimmage. I love his feistiness. I love the size. And really, when you're talking about a guy who's carrying some of that weight, is he going to show up at 215 pounds there at the Combine? And then ultimately, what's he going to run? I think that's going to be one of the biggest things. Not only that 40 time, that's the vertical speed and be able to see that. You want to take a look at the 10-yard split because, is it more build-up speed or can he get to that full speed in a hurry? And then obviously the lateral agility, the fluidity in his hips. I think Terrell Smith is a guy that could potentially be sitting there as a day 2 consideration. Again, there's so many guys here that we could talk about in that same category. I think he'll probably end up being a 4th-round pick, but a guy that I think could really help an NFL franchise. Tyreek Stevenson, transferred from Georgia to Miami, 6 foot, 214 pounds. And I think for me with him, he's one of the better cover corners that are out there. You see his ability to drive on the football. He can be physical with you. He's going to come downhill. I saw him against Virginia in 2021 take on Wayne Talapapa, who's he's a physical running back, came downhill and really drilled him in that football game. The ball skills at times, he can make a play, but can he finish? I think there were some dropped interceptions there. Want to see what those hands look like as well. Cam Trice out of Purdue, 6'3", 215. He's a big dude. So the question is really going to be, is he going to be playing corner or is he a safety? He's a guy that can kind of line up in a couple of different situations there. But look, he's a guy that has the ball skills. He has the length. He's a guy that's going to be able to go up and fight you. What I also loved was able to challenge Bryce Spann-Ford, a 6'7", 260-pound tight end there for Minnesota, and was able to get physical with that big tight end. And so I love that ability to be physical. I love his ability, the length and his ability to make a play on the football and coverage. But are we going to see stiffness? That's really going to be the biggest thing. Watch those transitions. Just how smooth is he going to be? Because look, he played safety at Purdue. They moved him to corner prior to the 2021 season. And really his best year was 2022 at that cornerback spot. Had a couple of picks, 10 pass breakups. One of those picks was actually a pick 6. But he's a guy that I think could end up being a safety at the next level, but has some of that coverability as well. DJ Turner, the second, there for Michigan, 6 foot, 180 pounds. And for me, DJ Turner was a guy, he was kind of up and down. I thought he looked really good at times. There was some tape that was a little iffy, but a dude that always seemed to put himself in position to make a play on the football. And I think that was something that was really nice. He will fly up from depth and make plays on the football. You see him in zone with really smooth hips, transitioning after his back pedal to really drive and close on the football. Want to be able to just continue to see that there at the combine. Carrington Valentine out of Kentucky. This guy's just a feisty corner. 6 foot, 200. People didn't really talk about him a whole lot during the season. Came out after his junior year, an interception, 10 pass breakups. A guy who I think could get himself drafted. I still think that he's going to be a day 3 guy. Would have loved to see him go back to Kentucky for another year, but again, a guy who I think plays bigger than his size, and I think he's somebody that needs to just showcase his ability to make some plays, and show off that athleticism. Jay Ward of LSU, 6'1", 180 pounds, corner, safety. Really, what is he? I think that's really going to be the big question mark there. Started his career with LSU as a corner, moved to safety in 2021, back to corner. I think he played some safety as well this past season. And so I think with him, again, look for stiffness in the drills, and a guy who I think ultimately will probably end up playing safety at the next level. You got Garrett Williams out of Syracuse, 6 foot, 190 pounds, and I really like Garrett Williams. I think this guy is a gamer. Unfortunately, the ACL tear, it sounds like he may be ready for training camp when it's all said and done. And look, a guy that has tremendous ball skills, 18 pass breakups coming into 2022, played in 7 games there in this past season, and a guy that can be physical. He was their leading tackler at one point, and he's a guy that loved to play in off coverage, a guy that would play tight as well. He could be physical with you. It was one of those things to where, like if you put on that Wake Forest game, A.T. Perry really abused him at times during that game, and that was one of the things that really gave me pause with him. That was actually the 2021 season when they played Wake, but there was just some time where you saw Perry eat up the cushion and off coverage, ends up taking it on a skinny post, and really just kind of ran right by him and set him up, throttled down, cut back to the inside, makes a plant as Williams was opening his hips to the inside, cuts back outside, easy score to the front pylon on a 69-yard touchdown. So it's one of those things to where I thought some of the film was spectacular with Garrett Williams. I thought there were times where he got burned. So I would have loved to have seen him compete here at the Combine, show off his athleticism, because I think you're going to see a little bit of stiffness to his game. But his game is being physical. He's a guy that wants to come up and hit you a little bit as well. So I think teams that want some of that physicality on the outside will be taking Garrett Williams, even with him coming back from injury. Then you get to Devin Witherspoon. Big number 31 for Illinois, 6 foot, 180 pounds, and the physicality is absolutely there. This is a dude that wants to look at and come downhill and break things up, blow you up, make plays. There were times where he'd get a little flat-footed on the outside and receivers would run by him, but most of the time there was no wasted movement. He was able to turn and run with you. He was able to show the quick transitions and drive back on the football. You saw the ball skills as well, attacking the ball in the air. And I think for me, when you're looking at Devin Witherspoon, we know the physicality with which he plays. He's 6 foot, 170 pounds. Did he put on any size? He's a little smaller in the in terms of the weight profile. So you wonder, can he hold up against some of the bigger receivers at the next level? So you want to see really what he weighs in at. But 5 interceptions, 25 pass breakups in his career. A guy that also has 11.5 tackles for loss. he definitely gets after it. But when you're talking about who the top corner is going to be coming out of the draft, what does he look like? How is he going to stack up versus Christian Gonzalez and Joey Porter Jr.? Those are really some of the questions that I think teams are going to want to answer, because I think these guys are going to be 1, 2, and 3 on every team's draft board. And then you get to Rajon Wright out of Oregon State, 6'2", 191 pounds, a guy that has good length. I think this is a guy that uses that length, can attack the football in the air. You see him being able to beat blocks coming downhill and drop guys right around the line of scrimmage as well. But look, he's 6'2", like Alex Austin, his teammate there with the Beavers. I think with Rajon, really what you want to see is the fluidity for a guy who's a taller corner at 6'2". 17 pass breakups in his career these last 2 years with the Beavers. So, this is a guy that we know can make plays on the football. I'm going to be excited to see what he can do, because I think he's one of the more underrated corners in this draft class. So now that takes us to the safeties, and we're going to kind of run quickly through the safeties because I know that we're coming up on time here. What's interesting with the safety position is we're going to start off with a couple of Alabama Crimson Tide teammates, Jordan Battle and Brian Branch. A couple of guys who I think could be top 5 safeties when it's all said and done. Jordan Battle is a player that, to me, he's got good film, he's got bad film. 3-year starter, a veteran presence there on the back end, a guy that plays center field and can drive on the football. Ball skills were inconsistent, I thought, at times. I thought he was a sure tackler in the open field, a guy that has tremendous range. Can show off some cover skills as well. You see some of that, stride for stride ability to run with the receiver, some savviness as well. You'll see him kind of pull on the shoulder pad a little bit or pull on the jersey. Never got called. So some of that savviness there, a veteran move, 6'1", 210 pounds. Just how fluid is he going to be? I think that's going to be a big question. But Brian Branch, for me, it was a guy that, I flirted with the idea of putting him in the top 20. I think it's still a possibility. You look at him at 6 foot, 190 pounds. He's a safety. He's a corner. The quick click and close ability. He arrives at the football with physicality, instincts and zone coverage. He's a blitzer. He's a tackler. Excellent in the open field, and a guy that he looks like he has real fluid hips, real oily hips there. A guy that, again, is going to drive on that football coming downhill, but he also has the range, sideline to sideline, playing over the top. And so I think this is a way to showcase and really solidify, put a stamp on him as the number 1 safety, and also be able to show that, hey, he's got some cover ability, so that's going to make him a very valuable commodity because he has that versatility. Jair Brown out of Penn State, another guy that I think is a tremendous athlete there on the outside. He's 5'11", 205, so a little bit undersized at that safety position, but a dude that's going to blitz, get downhill in a hurry, and make plays behind the line of scrimmage, get after that quarterback. A guy that, as a deep safety, can really drift, whether it's from the middle of the field to the hash, get outside the numbers. He has that ability over the top, and he can be physical as a presence down there in the box. Can come from depth as well. And to me, I think Jair Brown, just show us your skill, show us your athleticism. I think he's a guy that I think is primed for a really solid 40 time. I think you see him driving downhill on the football. He explodes coming downhill. There's no question about that. That lateral agility is really what I'm going to be looking for. 10 interceptions in his career, 9 tackles for loss, including 7 this past season, 4.5 sacks as well. He's a physical presence and a guy that I think everybody should be taking notice of. Sidney Brown, Illinois, 6 foot, 205. Another guy who's very physical. I thought, I watched him against Michigan. Very tight coverage on a crossing route, stride for stride with that big tight end, Colston Loveland. You saw him blitzing, getting into the backfield, making his presence felt. A guy that is looking to attack that football. Strong safety, so you know that you're going to have that physicality, but a dude that has the ball skills that I don't think a lot of people were really expecting. You look at him, he looks physical, like just a box defender, but then you look at what he was able to do out in coverage. 6 interceptions this past season, 10 in his career, 7 pass breakups, 4 forced fumbles in his career, 2 pick sixes, 320 tackles in his 5 years there with the Fighting Illini, 10 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. The guy does a little bit of everything, and really the biggest thing that I'm looking for again is some of that fluidity with him, because I see the athlete there on the field, and this is one of those guys that I think could absolutely showcase some of that. I thought that he did struggle at times going up against Sam Laporta, the Iowa tight end at times there. Laporta lines up in the slot. Laporta at 3 yards showed an outside release with the jab step outside, that hard sell to turn the hips of Brown towards that sideline. Step back to the inside, cuts up that seam for a good 33 yards. Laporta on an out route at 16 yards, drives on that football as he's coming out of the cut, was able to get inside the tight end and disrupt the pass. So even though he struggled at times there with covering that tight end with that route running, really sold that fake, got Brown to open up the hips. He was able to return the favor and come back. So you love that gaming mentality. Hey, I got beat. I struggled a little bit there, but I was able to come back off of that and make a play against the tight end. To me, Sidney Brown should be a day 2 pick. I mean, hands down, this is a guy that can make plays all over the football field. So I think this will be a way to help him solidify that. Shamari Connor, Virginia Tech, 6 foot and 215 pounds. A guy that really was a nickel for them, and another guy that racked up a ton of tackles. 314 to be exact, 21 tackles for loss, had 10 tackles for loss in 2019. Also had 5.5 sacks, 4 interceptions, 19 pass breakups as well. A guy that really people aren't talking a ton about, but you saw some of the cover skills, his ability to get his hand in and make plays on the football. And I think because he's a guy that teams really, or I shouldn't say that, that people aren't really talking about, this could be a way to really showcase that ability. This is a guy that can play around the line of scrimmage, can play in the box, and what can he show up as an athlete at the combine? What can he show up with to really get teams to say, you know what, we got to go back and study some film? Because if you watch the film, you're going to see a guy that can cover a little bit, a guy that's going to play well in the box, a guy that if he gets beat, forgets about it, and is making a play on the very next down. So I actually am a fan of Shamari Connor, and a guy that I think should get drafted on day 3. Trey Dean out of Florida. Trey Dean the third, look, 6'3", 207, and he's a big physical dude, and a guy that against Florida State reads the route. Jordan Travis throws late to Johnny Wilson coming across the field. Dean reads it, undercuts the route, but drops a sure pick 6. That's one of the things that you look at with him is, he's in position, but can he finish the play? When you look at that size as well, 6'3" and 207 pounds, and look, taller safeties, you worry about the stiffness. I look at a guy like Taylor Mays. I remember when he came out, everyone was talking about, unofficial 4.2, 440, winds up running a 4.43 at 6'3", and he was weighing 230 pounds, 34-inch arms. But really the biggest thing with him was, that coverability. He looked stiff in his hips. He was very stiff. He was kind of, very muscle bound. A guy that spent a ton of time in the weight room, was jacked. But the problem was there was a lot of stiffness in his hips, and so as a result, that limited his effectiveness, and ultimately I think also made an impact on his draft stock overall, because this was a guy who still got drafted in the second round, to USC, but I think it affected his ability there out on the football field, because I think a lot of people were expecting him to be a first-round pick. At times, he falls all the way to number 49. Just one season there with the 49ers. Bounced around to the Bengals for a few years, and then really after that, it was practice squad, etc. Vikings, Lions, Raiders. And then with the Bengals in 2016, before ultimately getting cut. This is a three-time first-team All-American. So it's one of those things. Those safeties, the bigger guys. Just how fluid are they going to be? I think Trey Dean's no exception. He's not as big as Taylor Mays by any means, but when you see these guys that are over 6 foot, when you get into that 6'3", and especially if they're over 200 pounds, you just wonder about how fluid they're going to be as an athlete. DeMarco Hellams there, out of Alabama, and when I think of DeMarco Hellams, this is a guy that, to me, seemed to fly around, make plays behind the line of scrimmage or right around the line of scrimmage, a guy that can play in the box a little bit. He was able to run stride for stride, going up against Jordan Whittington there against Texas, was able to affect the catch point there on that play, was able to drive and make plays on in the running game as well. Watched him against Mississippi State, run coming into the boundary, and Hellams is ultimately able to get over there, wrap up the running back Jo'quavious Marks for just a short gain. So that's one of the things that I think you see some of that range. He can play over the top. He can fly downhill at 6'1", 208 pounds. Again, just looking at just how athletic is he going to be. Ronnie Hickman out of Ohio State, 6'1", 207, came out as a junior. He's one of those guys I would have loved to have seen come back for another season, because I saw some up and down play for him. I thought he took some really poor angles at times. But as a box defender, you saw reading the screen to the slot receiver, scrapes over the top, able to ultimately drop the receiver with a very sure open field tackle. Got called against Michigan. Arrived way too early at Ronnie Bell in the back end zone. Got called for defensive pass interference. So up and down. Then he knifes in, makes a play on Donovan Edwards for no gain. So a guy that can make plays on that football, drives on it well. Against Akron, there was a crossing route to the tight end, went off of his hands. He was trailing the play, able to make a play on that football, wound up taking it 48 yards for the score. I think Hickman has a chance to be one of the more athletic safeties in this draft, and so I think that'll ultimately help his draft stock, see if he can really solidify his status as a day 2 guy. Brandon Hill out of Pittsburgh. Now, Brandon Hill is an interesting guy. To me, I was kind of surprised that he came out. 5'11", 195 pounds. This past season, 67 tackles, just 2 pass breakups in 12 games. I really thought that 2021 might have been his best season there with the Pitt Panthers. And to me, I think he's really going to have to come out and showcase athleticism that kind of sets him apart. Because for me, I see a lot of guys in this class that I would take ahead of Brandon Hill. So I think he's got his work cut out for him. He's one of those guys that you're expecting to come out and hopefully, set the world on fire with his workouts. Because he's one of those guys that I think will get drafted, but I think he'll end up being, towards that middle day 3 when it's all said and done. Jordan Howden out of Minnesota, 6 foot, 210 pounds. He's a bigger physical safety, a guy that is going to come downhill, make plays on the running game. Look, he's a guy that was able to stick his nose in there against Northwestern, go up against a physical runner like Evan Hull, nail him in the hole, and drive him back shy of a first down. Watched him against Syracuse in the Pinstripe Bowl. There was a slot fade down the sideline. Did a great job with inside leverage on Oronde Gadsden II, able to attack that catch point and ensure that Gadsden wasn't able to haul that in. Was able to come over the top of some of the routes, especially balls hanging up in the air, able to make a play on the football. I think Jordan Howden is one of the more underrated safeties in this draft class. People aren't really talking about him a ton. So I'll be curious to see the type of athlete that shows up there at the combine. 4 interceptions, 20 pass breakups, 240 tackles in his career. Had 3.5 tackles for loss this past season. So he's one of those guys I think could end up really improving his draft stock here at the combine. Anthony Johnson out of Iowa State. I'm a big fan of his because this was a guy that anytime I watched Iowa State play, the Cyclones, he just seemed to be putting his nose in and making a play on the football. 14 tackles for loss in his career. Really, that 2019 season was his best year overall. 7 tackles for loss, a couple of sacks, 10 pass breakups. But a guy that I think played some corner, also a safety. A guy that I think is a very sure tackler in the open field. He's very tough in punt cover as well. So you saw some of that. Lined up on Eric Gray when they played Oklahoma, and ran it out, drove on that football, wrapped up the running back, redirected him away from the end zone. So you see some of that, his ability to wrap up and get physical as well. Come down in the hole in the running game and drill you, and then make a play over the top on the very next play. So I think he's a guy that will be a day 3 guy, but a guy that I think can end up sticking with the roster because of that versatility. Which then leads us to Antonio Johnson. Nickel safety there for Texas A&M, did a little bit of everything. 6'3", 200 pounds. The junior, anytime you put the film on, he just seemed to be making plays. Even if you were trying to watch film on somebody else, you couldn't help but see 27 around the football, that nose. He understood where the first down marker was, would put his heels on that line, drive on the football, and make plays on that ball, whether it was attacking that football to break it up or ensuring that receiver did not get to the sticks. Very solid wrap-up tackler, really a violent tackler as well. And he's just one of those guys that you just want to see as an athlete, the fluidity, because you see, the outside leverage versus the run really on a stretch play to the wide side, really stayed square, stayed at home, able to scrape there, and it's run spill to the outside. He was able to really move with the play and make a play out on the boundary there for a loss of 1 yard. To me, Antonio Johnson is one of those guys who could be a first-round pick. Could also come off the board at the top of day number 2. I think a team like the Buffalo Bills would love to have Antonio Johnson, especially when you've got Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, what's happening there. There may be one final last hurrah there, but if Jordan Poyer isn't re-signed, then you've got a guy that you can bring in. I think another team that could potentially be interested in him are the Cincinnati Bengals. They have Daxton Hill already, but depending, you can't sign both Von Bell and Jesse Bates. So depending on what happens there, they could be in the market for another safety. I think with Daxton Hill there, ultimately what you're going to see is, Bates and Hill will be my guess, more than likely. But that could be a team that could still be interested. I think, with Baltimore could be interested in bringing him in as well, potentially there in round number 1. Ultimately, it's going to be interesting. I don't think he gets past the first couple of picks there on day number 2 because he is one of those playmaking athletes with tremendous size on the back end of the defense. Tyreek Jones, Boise State with a couple of safeties who are going to get drafted. 6'2", 206. This is a guy who makes a lot of plays around the line of scrimmage, a guy that also has ball skills coming over the top. He's a physical dude. Just want to see some of that fluidity. What are we dealing with? Is this a guy that can line up and cover guys a little bit? Just want to see those natural ball skills come out, and just want to see just how fluid those hips are going to be. Brandon Joseph, this dude, he's a guy, he's a finesse guy. 6'1", 192 pounds. He's a guy that loves to play over the top. I think everybody took notice of him, and they were surprised when they saw the 6 interceptions as a redshirt freshman there for Northwestern. Since then, the last 2 seasons, he just hasn't lived up to that form. I don't really think that I've seen him continue to progress his game and become a better player. One of those guys that does a good job reading the quarterback's eyes, can drive on the football and make a play. You'll see him run the alley. I said that he wasn't very physical, but that Ohio State game, he did come up and get physical with Jackson Smith and Jigba. You saw the fluidity in his hips there against Michigan in 2021 at times. Fluid in his back pedal, often lined up in the slot. And to me, I want to see the athlete show up. Want to see him really start to separate himself a little bit, because he's one of those guys to me that he leaves me scratching my head and wanting more whenever I watch the film. Jartavius Martin, they're out of Illinois. I mean, Illinois, you think about the safety position, or I'm sorry, the defensive back position. You've got Martin to go along with Brown and Witherspoon. They really had some guys on the back end of that defense. 6 foot, 195 pounds, very versatile defender. 3 interceptions, 11 pass breakups this past season. A guy that could cover guys in the slot. A guy that you would also play over on the back end of the defense, over the top. A guy that can play in the box a little bit. I think he's that Swiss Army knife. And really, what you're looking at is, if he's a very fluid athlete, that's just going to bode well for those cover skills as well. Continue to bump that draft stock up. I've got him as a 4th round guy. Could potentially find his way into round number 3 when it's all said and done. Kayvon Merriweather, look, when you're getting an Iowa corner or an Iowa safety, they're going to be well coached, and Kayvon Merriweather is just that. 6 foot, 212 pounds. He'll play in the box. He can be physical. He's going to chase you down, run the alley really well, and that's really what I have written down time and time again with Merriweather is kind of that box safety and a guy that look to get physical with you around the line of scrimmage and make some plays. The question really is going to be, you love the safeties who are physical, you love their ability to come downhill, but again, what are we going to see with the lateral quickness, his ability to flip those hips and turn and run? Those are going to be some of the things they're going to be looking forward to there with Kayvon Merriweather. Javarius Owens out of Houston. So Javarius Owens, interesting kid, 6 foot, 200 pounds, transfer from NEO A&M College, safety into the boundary, a guy that will drive on the football, make a play, but really the biggest thing that I noticed with him was he seemed to be a step slow. There's a little bit of hesitation at times coming and driving on the football, so there were some catches made on his side of the field that really you were expecting him to go make a play on. Overall, though, in his 4 seasons with the Cougars, over 200 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 4 interceptions, 15 pass breakups. He's just one of those guys that kind of left you wanting a little bit more. So really want to see what type of an athlete he truly is, because he's a guy that, for me, the game film had me wanting to see more out of him than really what I was seeing. And so if he's that athlete, maybe I can go back and look at the film in a different light a little bit. Jimmy Robinson, Florida State. This is a dude who's really fun to watch. 5'11", 199 pounds, was a real leader there for the Florida State Seminoles. Transferred from South Carolina after the 2020 season. First year there, 4 interceptions. A guy that had back-to-back seasons with 80-plus tackles. Had at least 5 tackles for loss in each of those years as well. A guy that can be a physical presence at that safety spot. Can be a downhill blitzer. Does a great job coming downhill. You saw the change of direction ability, like against Oklahoma. He's blitzing, gets to the quarterback. Then you see that change of direction. Dylan Gabriel tries to get outside to avoid him. Ultimately gets back inside. Robinson stayed with that quarterback, got the sack, was the leading tackler for FSU. 2022 All-ACC first team. You see him in the box. You see him on the outside. He's beating the blocks of guards and shooting into the backfield, making plays. This is a guy that played three positions against Florida. He can bend coming off the edge to rush the quarterback. Saw that against Anthony Richardson there in that Florida game. He needs to make sure that he plays under control against Louisville. Came downhill, and Malik Cunningham was able to make a quick lateral cut on him to make him miss in the open field. But man, he's a lot of fun to watch, and I expect him to have a really solid combine, because I think will absolutely show off that athleticism. Which then leads us to Daniel Scott out of Cal. Look, 6'2", 215 pounds, one of the top tacklers in the Pac-12, a guy that can disrupt the catch at the catch point, a guy that can be physical on the back end of the defense a little bit. And he showed some ability to cover both tight ends and receivers. He's one of those guys that I think needs to continue to showcase some of that athleticism. J.L. Skinner, 6'4", 218 pounds there out of Boise State. Unfortunately, he won't be competing at the combine. He was injured, and really bummed about that, because I think this is a guy that is very active on the back end. A lot of skills that Skinner brings to the table. You love that size, but again, when you're talking about those bigger safeties, you worry about some of that stiffness and some of that coverability. But look, there's no question that this is a guy that has a ton of range. He can be physical. He's a guy that's going to attack the catch point, a guy that's going to really come downhill and make his presence felt. He's very aggressive, as I mentioned, and would have loved to have seen him compete there at the combine, because I think for his size, if he could showcase the ability to turn and run, show that really fluid hips, I think that would really go a long way towards solidifying his status on day 2 of the draft. Christopher Smith out of Georgia, 5'10", 185 pounds. To me, he's one of the more intelligent safeties in the entire draft class. Obviously, what he did against LSU in the SEC championship, ultimately picking up the ball on the blocked field goal by Nazir Stackhouse. Ball was just sitting there at the 5-yard line, picks it up, returns it 95 yards for the score. But a guy that always seemed to be putting himself in position to make a play. You loved his ability coming downhill, his ability to get to the outside against the run, his ability to play over the top. To me, he did a little bit of everything, and I thought he was the leader of that, the unquestioned leader on the back end of that defense, and really one of the leaders of Kirby Smart's defense there with the Georgia Bulldogs. 6 interceptions, 10 pass breakups in his career, 6 tackles for loss, just 132 tackles, but I don't think the numbers really speak for themselves. I think there's really a lot more to the story when you're talking about Christopher Brown, because his ability to, you just watch, when you study his film, it's textbook. He puts himself in a position to make a play on the football. The biggest thing that you wonder about him is he's a little undersized, so that's going to limit things. How, the length, just how long is this guy going to be? And then also the type of athlete that we're going to be seeing. Is he a guy that's going to showcase that range at the next level? So I think those are things that I'm going to be looking forward to there at the combine, is really, can he solidify his status as a day 2 guy? I think Green Bay is going to need a safety, and Christopher Smith seems like the type of guy that would fit in very nicely there in Green Bay. Jason Taylor II out of Oklahoma State. I think this is a dude that people haven't really talked about, and I think he's one of the better safeties that nobody really has heard of. And I don't know why nobody's really heard of the guy. But 99 tackles this past season, 6 interceptions, 7 pass breakups. So he's got a nose for the football, knows how to make a play on the ball as well. 5th-year senior there for the Cowboys. And what you really love is his ability to come downhill. Loved his ability to take on Braylon Allen, who's a big physical running back, and was able to wrap him up in the open field after just a short gain. 6 foot, 215 pounds. And he's a guy that again, he was making plays all over the field for OSU, and I think if he has a nice combine performance, then he's going to be somebody that will start drawing some chatter there, as a day 3 selection. And then Rashad Torrance out of Florida, 6 foot, 202. The junior plays very fast downhill versus the pass and the run. I thought that he does a decent job in coverage at times. You're going to see some physicality arriving at the football and making a big hit to try to draw the football loose. Saw him. There was times where in the running game he used those arm tackles and would whiff rather than break down. He just kind of lunges at the ball carrier. But with Rashad Torrance, just want to see just how athletic he's going to be. He plays fast coming downhill, but what can he do laterally? Can he flip those hips, turn and run? I mean, some of those drills are really going to expose a lot of the guys that have those stiff hips. And it's going to be very apparent at the combine, both for the corners and the safeties. You're going to run a lot of the same drills, and really you're going to be looking at the change of direction, their ability coming out of their back pedal. You're going to want to watch those hips. Can they turn and run? Can they flip that from the outside to the inside? Really, what's that going to look like? And then also, obviously, can they finish? When the ball's coming at them, can they make a play on the football? Can they haul it in? All in all, I'm very excited about this defensive back class, both the corners and the safeties. I think there are a lot of guys who are going to get drafted early, especially at that cornerback position. I think you could have as many as maybe 6 corners come off the board in round number 1, and then see another 6 come off the board in round number 2. Wouldn't even be surprised if there's even more than that, to be perfectly honest with you, because there are a lot of guys, a lot of length, a lot of depth at the position as well. That's the thing that I think is going to be really exciting. And at the safety spot, you've got some guys that are going to be making plays on the football. You've got those guys on that back end, and you really just want to see just how fluid of an athlete these guys are going to be. And when you watch the game film, are you seeing that same athlete in front of you? And if the answer is, it's got you questioning or second guessing yourself, maybe they're not the athlete that you were expecting, that's going to send you back to the game film, or vice versa. You may look at them and say, well, I wasn't expecting to see that. And you want to go back and study the game film a little bit more. I'll tell you what, when I watched Taylor Mays at the combine, and I watched just how stiff he was in the hips, kind of had a feeling, but there was some bias as a Trojan alum and seeing his playmaking ability. I went back and watched some of the game film, and again, and sure enough, it showed up. You saw some of that stiffness in the transitions, and ultimately it didn't affect his draft status too much because he still was a second rounder. But he was a guy that people were talking about as a potential first-round pick. I mean, especially with how fast he was running for a guy that big. And you love the ability to come downhill. But if you can't turn and run, if you can't cover, if you struggle moving laterally, then at that safety spot, you're going to get exposed. And I think that was one of the things that Taylor Mays ultimately did end up getting exposed, and why his NFL career was kind of cut short. And so that's ultimately what you're going to be looking at this group. You want to see that versatility. Are there some safeties who can really showcase some of that coverability? Because the more versatile they are, the better off you're going to be, in terms of that draft status overall. The same thing with the cornerback, position. Our guys, you got the true cover corners that you can put out on an island. You got the physical guys that are going to be jamming you at the line of scrimmage. You've got guys that can play inside, and guys that can do a little bit of both. They can play both inside and outside. Some of the smaller guys, what do they look like on the outside? Are they strictly a slot corner, or can we put them on the outside? What does that look like? And then some of the corners who have that ability to also play that safety spot as well. And hey, they can fill in at that cornerback position in a pinch, but you're likely going to play him at safety. That's really going to be something that you're going to be looking at that position as well. So I think the more that you can add to your tool belt, then at the end of the day, that's going to make you more marketable as a draft pick. So we'll go ahead and wrap things up here for the defensive back position. Make sure tune into the NFL Network and watch the combine. Watch these corners and safeties perform. And then next week, after the combine performance on the field has been wrapped up, we'll talk about who the winners and losers were at all of the positions, including the cornerbacks and safeties. We've got a lot to cover over the next few days. I'll make sure to bring all of it to you as I see it. So for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the combine. Enjoy your weekend. And until next time, I am out of here.